Around Sunday evening, Lila walked through the front door, casually tossing her purse and keys onto the wingback chair before striding down the hall toward the master bedroom. I couldn't be sure if she noticed me slumped in the den, but honestly, it didn't matter. Over the years, I had grown nearly invisible to her. I picked up her key ring and started sorting through it. I extracted the spare keys she had for my Toyota, then opened her purse. From there, I pulled out her cell phone and wallet. I emptied all the cash and credit cards into my pocket, just to be safe. I even took her driver's license. After that, I settled back into my seat in the den. A few minutes later, Lee emerged from the hallway, looking sharp as she slung her purse strap over her shoulder and grabbed her keys. "I'm going out with the girls from work. Don't wait up for me," she announced. "No, you're not going out with the girls from work," I shot back. "Ryan, you should know by now that you don't control me. I will do whatever I please." "I didn't say you couldn't go out. What I meant is you're not going out with the girls from work. You're gonna go sleep with your boyfriend, so stop lying to me." Learly stood there, silent for a few moments, before marching boldly into the den to deliver her ultimatum. "Okay, Ryan, I would have preferred a different approach, but let's just get this over with. You have two options. You can salvage what's left of this marriage by playing along, or you can choose to get divorced, and I'll take everything you have. What's it gonna be?" "Option 3, I replied with a grin. "Don't be childish. There's no door number 3, except for the fact that I now have a lover, someone real for a change. Or be prepared to face the consequences. And I mean serious consequences." I stood up and walked over to her, gripping her shoulders and pushing her against the wall. I slipped her engagement and wedding rings off her left hand, my face mere inches from hers, my expression cold and empty. I whispered, "Oh, there's definitely a door number 3. It's right over there." I gestured toward the front door. "When you walk through that door, it'll be the last time. You'll leave with only the clothes on your back, and you won't step inside again. Not a penny more of my money will you see. You will lose your husband, your daughter, your house, your finances, your car, and your job. You're living in a fantasy world, Ryan," she stammered nervously. "My lawyer will tear you apart. I'm having the divorce papers served at your workplace tomorrow. If you hurt me, you'll suffer even more." I pulled her shoulders away from the wall and forcibly guided her toward the front door, her high heels stumbling as I pushed her out. She yelled incoherently, struggling to maintain her balance, her composure completely shattered. Throughout our entire marriage, I had never laid a finger on her, leaving her unsure how to respond. Once outside, she tried to regain her footing and assert herself. At that moment, I shut the door and engaged the new locks. As she drove away, I made my first call. I dialed my daughter, who was away at college. "Honey, it's your dad. Things have finally come to a head with your mother. She's likely going to be living with her boyfriend, and I wanted you to be the first to know. I have recorded our last conversation, along with hours of previous arguments. You can listen to them if you need to. So remember that you have access to the truth when she inevitably tries to twist things around and place the blame on me. And trust me, she will do that, sweetheart. The reality is that your mother is unfaithful. I can't say how many times she's strayed, but this time she's willing to throw our family away for someone else. As I'll explain soon, this new guy might be dangerous, so please be careful when dealing with your mom." I then asked Sophie if she could come home that weekend to talk and listen to the recordings if necessary. She agreed to drive back on Friday afternoon. My next call was to Rachel, our neighbor at the end of the block. Rachel was a war widow in her mid-30s. "Rachel, this is Ryan. If your offer still stands, I'd like to take you up on it. Can you come over in about an hour?" I despise drawn-out stories about troubled marriages, so I planned to keep this one brief. Tom and I met, married early on, and had a daughter named Sophie. The first few years were fine, but it didn't take long for Lee's enthusiasm to fade. As time went on, she became insufferable. She turned into a constant complainer, a master manipulator, and a relentless taskmaster. I tried my best to keep my mouth shut and make things better for her, but it felt like the more I tried, the worse it became. Looking back, I now see that I contributed to my own unhappiness by trying to placate Lee. All those years, I wish I had handled things differently, taken control of the situation early on. So here we are now, in our mid-40s, and everything has completely unraveled. Once I got suspicious of Lee and did a little digging, I discovered her boyfriend right away, and the revelations were shocking. She had gotten involved with a muscle-bound ex-con with a history of violence against women. I don't think Lee realized it at first, but her lover had at least 2 other women lined up. The guy's name is Marcus. Yes, Marcus, and naturally he goes by Mark. When I learned about him, I was stunned, but at the same time, it made a twisted kind of sense. Once I understood that my marriage was truly over, an immense sense of relief washed over me, and I began to make my plans. I had heard tales of wronged husbands who settle for half of everything. Not me. I took every single penny I could find, including any cash lying around the house. I changed the locks, of course, and I intended to provoke Lee as much as possible in a very short time. After all, my marriage had taught me a lot about how she reacts, and I planned to use her anger against her. She was a dangerous woman in many respects, but this time, she would be a danger to herself as well. My planning had actually started long before I discovered her infidelity. It had been building for a couple of years. Whenever we argued, I had been recording our conversations. She thought the device I carried was merely an MP3 player, but in reality, I was creating a library of her behavior for documentation. I understood that no one would believe my stories without proof. When we were around others, including our daughter, she was sweet as pie. But when we were alone, that's when the real abuse happened. I wanted to expose her to everyone, including friends and family. The Monday following our Sunday showdown, I organized a party in the company break room. A large banner hung overhead reading, "Happy Divorce." I had cake and ice cream prepared and eagerly awaited the arrival of the process server. Lucky for me, it turned out to be a plump young woman who delivered the papers. My coworkers and I took plenty of pictures as we celebrated the delivery of the divorce papers. One photo captured me accepting the papers and giving the server a peck on the cheek while she sported a party hat. Another showed me feeding her a forkful of cake, both of us grinning from ear to ear. After the party, I emailed the photos to Lee, including some snapshots of myself and Rachel, my neighbor, in bed together, sheets pulled up to our necks, big smiles plastered across our faces. I hoped Lee would notice her wedding rings resting on my chest in those pictures. Not long after, I received an angry call from her. "You son of a bitch! My lawyer will have you for lunch with those pictures. What a dumbass you are." "Not likely, Lee. There's nothing inappropriate or damaging in those shots. No nudity. Just 2 neighbors playing a harmless prank. Just some joke pictures, that's all. We'll see about that, Ryan. I'm coming by tonight to collect some of my things. It'd be better if you weren't home. If I'm not there, you won't be able to get in. All the locks have been changed. If you want anything, you'll have to arrive well before Rachel, and I have a date at 7 p.m., and I really don't want to be late. Last night, I had the best sex I've ever had, and there's more coming tonight." I ended the call and ignored her 5 subsequent attempts to reach me. While I didn't answer all her calls from then on, I made sure to listen to every message. Unlike other guys I'd read about in similar situations, I had a good chance of catching Lee saying something incriminating or inadvertently revealing a secret during her furious calls. In fact, she did let her guard down several times over the following weeks. That afternoon, I decided to take a trip to the parking lot at Lee's workplace. I wanted to get there before people started leaving for home. I ensured there was no surveillance in the lot, and the job I had planned would take less than a minute. I parked next to her car and slipped around it, using a wire cutter to snip the valve stems on all her tires. Oh, she would be furious. Plus, she wouldn't be able to get her car fixed in time to reach the house before I did. As it turned out, she must have hitched a ride with someone else, so I knew she would be desperate to get inside our house. I had seen receipts for clothes she had bought that I knew she hadn't brought home, indicating she had plenty of outfits at her lover's place. Clearly, she must have been looking for something else. I slipped out the back door and hurried down to Rachel's house, leaving Lee pounding on the front door and screaming when I returned home that evening. I discovered that the front door window was shattered, blood smeared all around it. After reviewing the surveillance footage from the front porch, I called the police. The video clearly showed Lee smashing the window with a tire iron, presumably taken from her friend's car. You could hear her threatening to kill me as she broke the glass and reached inside. Unfortunately for her, the deadbolt I had installed required a key to open from either side. When she yanked her arm back through, she ended up slicing her forearm pretty badly, which led to another round of screaming and threats. I immediately reported the incident to the police, and one of the officers kindly walked me through the process of filing for a protection order. By the next morning, Lee was served with papers that prohibited her from coming within a specified distance of me or our home. To say she was furious would be an understatement. "What the hell do you think you're doing, asshole?" That's how our next phone call kicked off. She was seething and threatened me yet again. Unbeknownst to her, I recorded the entire conversation. A few hours later, after she had simmered down a bit, she called again to inform me that she was sending her friend Natalie over that evening to collect some of her belongings. I couldn't help but wonder what she was so desperate to retrieve from the house, but I agreed to receive Natalie that Tuesday night. I left work early to set up a video camera in my bedroom, with a monitor placed in the middle room. Natalie showed up right on time, and I was exceptionally polite. I settled on the bed while she filled 2 black trash bags with clothes. Looking at me nervously, she asked if I could fetch her some water from the kitchen. I smiled and walked into the middle room. As soon as I glanced at the monitor, I noticed Natalie stealthily sliding a shoebox from the closet into the bag closest to her. She returned to selecting clothes afterward. I quickly grabbed a glass of water from the kitchen and headed back to the bedroom. "I think that'll do it," she said. "Could you grab that bag while I take this one?" "That one looks heavier, Natalie. Let me handle it." "No, we're fine. Just grab the other one." "Is there something in that one I should know about?" "Natalie," I inquired as she began to fidget and pull her bag toward the door. I grasped her wrist and yanked the bag open. "It's just clothes and stuff Lee needs," she replied anxiously. "You're a terrible liar, Lynn. What's in this box?" I asked, feeling something hard inside. "Want to enlighten me?" I pulled the shoebox out and opened it. The box was stuffed with bundles of used-looking $100 bills. "Natalie, you're trying to steal from me," I said, standing up and twisting her arm behind her back as I marched her toward the door and down the hallway. "Ryan, that's Lee's money. She sent me here to get it. I'm not stealing anything." "Well, you came into my house for clothes, and I catch you leaving with a box of cash. I call that stealing. I don't see Lee's name on that box. You're a thief, Natalie. I'm calling the cops right now." "No, Ryan, don't do that. I can't go to jail. I have kids and a husband, for Christ's sake." I shoved Natalie down onto the couch, getting right in her face. "Natalie, you're not welcome in this house ever again." She begged me again, tears welling in her eyes. "If you want to redeem yourself, you've got one chance. You'll leave this house and tell Lee that I caught you stealing. Then you'll report back to me everything you hear or see, especially regarding our divorce or her activities with Mark. You can't let her know anything about our arrangement. Lee is making a huge mistake getting involved with this loser. Ultimately, you'll be helping her escape from him. If you cooperate, I have the whole incident on video, and I can call the cops at any moment." Reluctantly, Natalie agreed to be my informant. Once she was gone, I took the box of money and headed over to Rachel's house down the block. She was willing to hold it for me until I could stash it safely away, far from Lee's reach. I had a good idea of where the money had likely originated. Lee's Aunt Clara had been a notorious miser, and after she passed away a few months back, Lee had been her sole heir. I knew Aunt Clara had left a small cabin in a rural area to Lee, but there had never been any mention of cash. Apparently, When Lee checked out the cabin after the will was read, she found her aunt's hidden stash of cash. During a heated call, my cheating wife screamed at me, and I recorded the entire conversation, being cautious about what I said. "That money is mine, Ryan. I want my damn money." "Lee, I have no idea what you're talking about. I caught Natalie trying to steal cash from my bedside table." "That's my money. You know damn well what I mean." "The money is in the shoebox, and it's mine. It came from Aunt Clara. I inherited it." "Well, maybe Natalie did find some cash in a shoebox, but if she did, she must have taken it with her and kept it. I don't have it. Perhaps Natalie swiped it from you. And if you had cash here that I didn't know about, then you didn't report it on your taxes last year. I know this because I reviewed and signed the tax returns. You can call the police to investigate, and we'll notify the IRS that this money, if it exists, wasn't reported." She slammed the phone down, and I could sense that there would be repercussions. I had pushed Lee's buttons too hard for her not to react. Given the restraining order, she couldn't afford to be caught near the house. Since I had sabotaged her car, I figured she might seek revenge through my vehicle. So, I had a camera installed on my dashboard, but that wouldn't be enough. I wanted clear footage of her committing the act, should that be the path she chose. When I parked in the garage Wednesday morning, I set up an external camera outside the car, hidden from view. This camera transmitted video that I could monitor from my desk an hour before lunchtime. I watched on my laptop as Lee parked her car behind mine, got out, and began smashing my car with a hammer. She broke every window and dented every fender. I winced slightly as the camera captured her demolishing the windshield while screaming, "I'm gonna bash in your head." I dialed the cops and had a squad car waiting for her. As she emerged from the parking garage, I showed them the video along with my wrecked Toyota. They cuffed Lee and took her away to jail. It was clear that Lee had caused enough damage to face felony charges. The resisting arrest charge was just the icing on the cake. As they took her away, she turned to me with a pleading expression, but I merely stared back at her. On Wednesday, Lee's divorce lawyer called to inform me about a hearing scheduled for Thursday at 9 a.m. regarding access to the money I had liberated from our joint accounts. I found myself in the small courtroom, wondering if Lee had made bail. She arrived right on time with her lawyer, a smug look plastered on her face. Lee's lawyer addressed the judge. "Your Honor, my client has been cut off from the bank accounts she shared with her husband. He unlawfully withdrew all the money after she filed for divorce. We're asking the court for a temporary split of the assets at this time. Mr. Bennett, do you have anything to say?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied. "My unfaithful wife has ample funds of her own that she has been siphoning off from our joint accounts for months. The money I took was merely reasonable compensation since I am responsible for the house payments and bills. She abandoned our marriage and moved in with the man she's cheating on me with." Lee shot up from her seat. "That's a lie. He emptied our savings and checking accounts. He didn't leave me a dime." Her lawyer pulled her back down into her seat, and they had a brief conference while I passed the paperwork to the judge. "Your Honor, these are the banking records for the past year. You'll notice the amounts up until a few months ago, including Lee's paychecks highlighted in yellow and her periodic bonuses shown in orange. Then, about 6 months ago, her checks stopped being deposited in the joint account, and her bonuses vanished. I have a recording of my conversation with her personnel office if you'd like to hear it, which confirms that her direct deposit was altered at that time. The total amount diverted from our joint account is in the thousands, Your Honor. Clearly, my unfaithful wife has plenty of funds, all stolen from our marriage." The judge looked over the bank statements and then peered over his glasses at Learly. "Do you have anything to say about this, Mrs. Bennett?" Lee's lawyer slowly rose to respond. "Your Honor, just because my client may have some funds of her own does not relieve Mr. Bennett of his obligation to provide her with her due." "Well, Counselor, I don't appreciate being lied to. Miss Bennett claimed she was destitute, which I knew to be false. When she walked in here with a fancy lawyer like you, it's clear she is well funded by money that should be considered community property. She attempted to deceive both her husband and the court regarding that fact while Mr. Bennett pays the bills with his own funds. I see no reason to change any financial arrangements at this time. When the divorce settlement is finalized, the assets will be disclosed and divided accordingly. Case dismissed. As I exited, Lee caught up with me in the hallway. "I'll get you for this, you bastard. I'm going to tear you down." "Lee, you're not supposed to be within 100 feet of me. I'll call the cops if you don't move. By the way, how did you like jail? Are you ready to spend a lot more time there? You've got a felony charge hanging over your head." I could tell she wanted to take a swing at me, but I kept walking down the hall toward the exit. She stood there, fists clenched, her face twisted in anger, bright red. That evening, I decided to head to a local bar. It wasn't my usual spot, but it was where I'd met an interesting guy a month ago. Ethan was at his usual bar stool when I arrived. "Hey man, I remember you. What's your name again?" "Not important." "Ethan. Hey, do you still have that piece of crap car?" "Oh God, yes. I hate that thing. The wife took the good one when she ran off with that creep in a suit. Now the air conditioner is broken, and I'm roasting in this heat. Nobody will buy it, and it's my only means of getting around. She took all the money, and my credit is shot. Do you have your insurance paid up on it? If you do, I might be able to help you unload it and get something better." "I'm all ears, bro." "Okay, suppose you were driving down, say, Maple Street, and a gray cat suddenly dashed out in front of you. Naturally, you slam on the brakes, and there's a lady tailgating you who crashes into your junker at anything over 30 miles an hour. Your car would be totaled, but if your head is braced against the headrest and your seatbelt's on, you'd be okay physically. Insurance would cover your losses, and you could at least get a vehicle with air conditioning. But what if the person who hit me got hurt? I couldn't do that to some poor schnook. I can guarantee that the person who hits you would be a cheating bitch of a wife with no one else in the car if you follow my instructions. What do you think about that?" "Oh man, that would be great. I can't stand cheating bitches. All right, let's park that wreck at the corner of 5th and Lessing by 3 p.m. tomorrow. Look to your left, and when you see a blue Miata pull out of the parking lot heading your way, get in front of her. She's a tailgating bitch, so drive a block or so until she's right on your tail. Then, you see that cat crossing the road, slam on the brakes hard. Just stay in the car afterward. Dial the cops, and tell the EMS guys you think you might have whiplash. Oh, and by the way, I never met you. I'll never set foot in this bar again. And we don't know each other," I said. "Man, you're cold. Not as cold as the air conditioning in your new ride." I left work early on Friday to meet my daughter at home. She had finished her classes and rushed back to town, just like we had arranged on Sunday night. We talked for a while about the divorce situation, and I played her the recording of the conversation between her mother and me, including our talk about door number 3. Sophie was appalled by the ruthless tone her mother took and the demands she made. Then, I shared a selection of recordings I'd made over the previous 2 years, revealing a side of Lee that Sophie hadn't realized existed. "What do you know about this guy she's with, Dad?" she asked. "I know he's bad news, and I want you to stay away from him. If you have to meet your mom, make sure it's in a public place with people around. I don't know what he might do to try to get to me, so always protect yourself. If there's any chance he might be around. Dad, I knew you and Mom had some problems, but I never realized just how bad it was." I was ready for that question and launched into a lengthy explanation of my perspective. Here's a condensed version, Sophie. I believe your mother and I had drastically different views on how a marriage should function. I've done a lot of thinking about this, and I have a theory. Someone has probably already written a book about what I'm going to explain, but this is my own idea. There are 4 basic ways authority can be distributed in a relationship. First, there's a scenario where neither party takes control, causing things to drift aimlessly like a rudderless ship. Then, both people may assume responsibility, leading to constant arguments over who's in charge. Or they might divide things so that each has control over certain aspects of the relationship. Perhaps they can even share responsibilities equally. That's how I entered the relationship, expecting things to be balanced, but it didn't turn out that way. Another possibility is that the man takes charge. I know that we often view paternalistic relationships as abusive and demeaning to women, but if the man is wholly devoted to his wife, it can resemble a fairy tale. It could be a wonderful life for a wife with the right temperament, as she wouldn't have to worry about making tough choices, knowing her man would always take care of her. Then there's the example of your maternal grandparents. You know how grandma was always meek as a mouse while grandpa was heavy-handed, bossy, and occasionally cruel. That's what your mom grew up witnessing, and I think that's what she expected in our relationship. So, when I tried to share the top spot with her, she began to see me as weak. The more I catered to her, the more disrespectful she became. This brings me to the last possibility, a wife-dominant relationship. I think your mom decided to take control when I failed to meet her expectations of masculinity. She became abusive toward me, dictating which projects I should tackle and how they should be completed. I can't tell you how many times she assigned me tasks and then hovered, telling me precisely how to do them. The number of projects left unfinished parallels the number of times I felt like a subordinate in my own home. She would literally dictate how I should hold my hammer or screwdriver while I was building or fixing something. It was utterly micromanaging and intolerable. You see, when a wife takes the lead, it often goes against human nature. I don't believe that kind of power distribution can ever work. A husband can be dominant while still loving and respecting his wife, but a wife typically loses respect for any man she dominates. That's what happened to us. When I began to realize how things were deteriorating and try to fight back, Learly didn't see me as taking charge. By then, she had me pegged as a wimp, and when I refused to let her boss me around, she just viewed me as a defiant child. I could never regain her respect. I think this divorce process is my final opportunity to earn it back. So, you'll understand my actions when you see how hard I have to make things for her, Sophie. Soon, you'll find someone to call your life partner. When you navigate decisions about having children, work, and where to live, make sure you figure out how authority will be distributed. Ensure that you and your partner are on the same page and that mutual respect is established. Otherwise, you'll both be miserable, and you might end up in a situation similar to the one your mother and I are in. I will, Dad. I promise. A little later, the phone rang. Mr. Bennett, this is Memorial Hospital. Your wife has been in a car accident. She's stable and not too badly injured, but she'll be with us at least overnight. Sophie and I drove to the hospital, and I let her enter the room first. She didn't stay long, and when she came out looking grim, I asked to speak with Lee alone. I suspected harsh words had passed between them. Gee, you look terrible, Lee, I said with a slight grin. What a lousy week for you. First, you lose your marriage, husband, and house. Then you get served with a restraining order, followed by your arrest for a felony. Now your car is wrecked, and you're stuck here in the hospital with a broken wrist and a face smashed by the airbag. This divorce seems to be working out much better for me. I've even got great sex waiting for me whenever I want. Fuck you, she snapped. Haley, where's old Mark? He hasn't come to visit yet. No worries. He's probably off fucking one of his other women right now. Her face paled. You probably didn't know about the others when you started all this, did you? Looks like you know now. I wonder how long it'll be before he wants you to service one of them. I never thought of you as a rug muncher, but it's probably a good skill to learn, seeing as you'll need it in jail. I'm not going to jail. My lawyer will get those bogus charges dropped. Really? Because when I spoke to the district attorney, he indicated he planned to throw the book at you. He's got photographic evidence, and with an election coming up, he wants to appear tough on crime. I think he'll go for the max. She just sat there, staring. Hey, what car insurance company did you decide to go with? Car insurance? What? I mean, we have the same old policy. You didn't get coverage this week when you filed on me? I dropped your car from the insurance. Surely you knew that. I mean, you insisted that your Miata be solely in your name, so it's your responsibility. Honey, if you didn't get coverage this week, you're really screwed. You'll have a couple of tickets to pay, towing charges, and 3 years of payments to make. You might not even be able to afford another vehicle, and that Miata will be rotting in some junkyard while you're still on the hook for it. But you might not need another car since you won't have a job after getting convicted of a felony. Plus, the guy you hit may have medical bills, and his insurance company is going to come after you for damages. Holy shit. But hey, at least your health care is covered, right? I'm on your. No, I dropped you from my health insurance on Monday. You didn't change that either. Baby, you're in deep trouble. An ambulance ride, emergency room visit, x-rays, a doctor's bill, a cast on your right arm, a hospital stay, aftercare, all of that will cost you thousands. Hey, speaking of medical expenses, remember that time you got sick a couple of years ago? I took a week off work to take care of you. I held your head while you threw up, and I cleaned everything up when you didn't quite make it to the bathroom. I called the doctor and ran to the pharmacy to get you some medicine. When you got better in a week, you went right back to ragging on me and calling me childish. I wonder how well Mark will take care of you the next time you fall ill. Well, I gotta go give Mark a call. When do you think he'll be done screwing his other whore? Have a nice life. Literally just sat there crying as I walked out. I didn't care. After that, life went on without much incident for a while. I checked in with Natalie occasionally. She was growing increasingly alarmed by Mark's hold over Lee, and eventually, Natalie drifted away from her. Then one evening, as I returned home and walked toward my front door, I was suddenly tackled on the lawn. I had been cautious about potential attacks, but I didn't see this one coming. The guy, wearing a ski mask, knocked the wind out of me and twisted my arm behind my back. He shouted in my ear, demanding that I give him the shoebox of money and tell the district attorney to drop the charges. It was obviously Mark, and I wasn't in a position to defend myself. However, I still had my car clicker in hand, so I hit the panic button, setting off the alarm. Mark got furious and clocked me on the back of my head before he got up and took off. Lights started coming on in my neighbors' houses, and people began to peek outside. I yelled for someone to call the cops, and in a few minutes an officer arrived. I wasn't hurt badly enough to need an EMS ride, and Mark was long gone. None of my neighbors could identify him, so he got away with the assault. A worse shock came the next day when I called my daughter to tell her about the incident. Dad, I didn't want to tell you, but I had a run-in with Mark too. Mom called me to talk. I told her we could chat, but it had to be away from the apartment. She asked me to pick her up, but when I got there, she pulled me inside and made me sit on her couch. Then Mark came out and started talking to me. He said that since Mom couldn't perform very well in bed due to her injuries, I had to take up the slack. He claimed she owed him, and I was the payment. I looked at her, and she just stared at the floor, saying nothing. Mark told me to make her do it. Mom looked up at me and said, "Please, baby, go along with him. It won't be so bad, and I really need you to do this for me." Then he grabbed my wrist and tried to pull me up, saying we were going to the bedroom. My right hand was on the pepper spray in my purse, and as he yanked me up, I hit him in the face with it. He screamed, clutching his face in agony, while I frantically grabbed my purse and tried to pull Mom out the door. She resisted, heading straight for him instead. I shouted at her to hurry up, but she was busy helping him into the bathroom, so I just walked away. I couldn't believe my own mother was trying to set me up with that scumbag. Forgiving her for that feels impossible. I was fuming, just like any father would be in my position. Thoughts of the Beretta cheetah stashed in the bedroom crossed my mind, and I nearly went to retrieve it. After a while, my daughter calmed me down, reminding me that she hadn't been hurt and urged me to think about the future. I made Patty promise to stay at school until the trial concluded and to always have protection with her. She assured me that she'd only hang out with other students and never put herself in a compromising position. Gradually, I managed to regain my composure. Mark had suggested I speak with the district attorney, but he likely didn't expect me to actually do it. I did, though. I played the recording of my daughter sharing her story about Mark and reminded the attorney that Mark had attacked me. The district attorney asked if I wanted to go easy on Lee or perhaps even drop the charges. Absolutely not, I insisted. I wanted to throw the book at her. Lee is trapped under this snake's influence, and the only way to help her is to remove her from that toxic situation. A few months in jail might just set her straight. The district attorney agreed, and the trial proceeded. I felt relatively secure at home and work, but there were moments of vulnerability. While traveling to and from the parking garage, I was acutely aware of the potential for an attack. My anxiety peaked during my commutes to and from work. Our house sits in a subdivision about 10 miles down a long ranch road. It's the only exit from that road, and the only other entities out there are expansive ranches behind locked gates. So, I remained vigilant about the other vehicles on that stretch home. I kept the Beretta in my car at all times. One evening, just days before Lee's trial was set to begin, I noticed a pickup's headlights tailing me about 2 miles from home, and my skin prickled with unease. As it drew closer, I noticed it was sticking to my back bumper. I punched in the police on my phone and hit the record button on my little recorder while easing my speed. The pickup stayed glued to me. I provided a running commentary to the operator, asking her to get in touch with the detective who had investigated my earlier beating. The pickup maintained its pursuit for another 5 miles. As I frantically relayed my situation, the pistol sat beside me, and I eased off the safety. Ahead, I spotted a bridge crossing a small creek bed, flanked by old concrete abutments. I figured that Mark or whoever was behind the wheel would try to force me off the road before the bridge. The pickup sped up alongside me, clearly intending to nudge me off course. I caught a glimpse of Lee's face in the passenger seat as the truck moved beside us. I slammed on the brakes hard enough to skid, yet not so hard that I lost control. The truck pulled ahead, but barely missed my front bumper because of my braking. My car ended up sideways on the shoulder, its rear sloping down toward the creek bed. I quickly scrambled out, grabbing the pistol, my phone, and the recorder before heading down the steep gravel slope and under the bridge. As I descended, I noticed the pickup's brake lights flicking on. I stumbled through the darkness, feeling my way beneath the bridge. At that moment, I was more worried about what might be lurking in the dark than a rattlesnake. I was panting heavily, desperate to find a safe spot to conceal myself. Finally, I paused and chambered a round in the Beretta. I waited in silence, but after a while, nothing happened. The connection to the police dropped. I attempted to redial in the darkness, but being under the bridge wasn't conducive to getting a signal. I felt trapped, unsure if help was on the way. At least I couldn't hear the growl of that pickup above me. I convinced myself I could stay there all night if necessary. It felt like ages, but it was probably only a few minutes before I finally heard a siren in the distance, coming from the same direction I had just traveled. If they were that far behind, there was no way they'd catch the pickup. The police car seemed to stop upon seeing my vehicle on the shoulder, prompting me to cautiously head back up the slope, leaving the Beretta behind. I raised my hands, pleading with them not to shoot. As I approached the road, I spotted 2 police cars blocking both lanes. Just then, I heard sirens approaching from the opposite direction and saw the pickup returning toward the bridge. I hit the dirt and flattened myself against the ground. I couldn't see much, but I heard the pickup screech to a halt, followed by the officers shouting for the driver to get out and lie on the ground. The other cop cars trailing the pickup also came to a stop. Soon it was over. Lee and Mark the Snake were taken into custody, charged with attempted murder. I was shaken but managed to return home, take a shower, and unsuccessfully try to sleep. When your spouse is facing multiple felony charges, getting a divorce feels surprisingly straightforward. I received a lot of sympathy from the judge, and there was no pushback from Lee or her frazzled attorney. Lee was frantic to minimize her jail time. Through her lawyer, she offered to give me essentially everything in the divorce in exchange for any help I could provide in reducing her sentence. During the sentencing hearing, I testified that she had been a good wife and mother until she fell under Mark's influence. I told the judge that, with time, I could forgive her for trying to kill me. I conveniently left out the fact that she had likely cheated on me with other men and had made my life hell for years. I couldn't read her expression in the courtroom, and I never spoke to her directly during that time. In the end, Mark was sentenced to a long prison term, as it wasn't his first offense. I sincerely hope he's sharing a cell with a big, sweaty guy named Bubba who thinks he's cute. The judge was kinder to Lee, but it would be at least 3 years before she could apply for parole. It's now been about 4 years since Lee was incarcerated. I recently heard from the district attorney's office that she was released on parole about a year ago. I kept waiting to hear from her. I know she's not in contact with Sophie either. Revenge is all well and good, but nothing beats resolution. I found myself unable to stop thinking about everything that had happened, and so I did something I never expected to do. I looked at my ex-wife, Lee. This is Ryan. I have something of yours that I want to return. I called the halfway house where Lee was living, waiting several seconds for a response. I wasn't sure she had heard me. There was silence. Lee, I have a shoebox for you. I thought she might hang up, but eventually she spoke. Where? When? I don't care. We can meet somewhere neutral, like a restaurant, or you can come to the house. Whatever works for you on Sunday. Maybe. Are you free on Sunday? She fell silent again. I'll come by on Sunday at... Then the phone went dead. How do you prepare for a meeting with your ex-wife? The mother of your child? The woman who tried to kill you? Now a convicted felon? I made lemonade and cookies and dressed casually. When I opened the door for Lee, neither of us attempted a handshake or hug. We simply exchanged hellos, and I motioned for her to enter the den. Her hair was much shorter now, and her look was hard. There was hardly any makeup on her. Time had clearly taken its toll. On the coffee table were drinks, cookies, and a shoebox. She sat opposite the couch, and when I offered her refreshments, she declined. Did she think I might have tried to poison her? Okay, if you don't want lemonade and cookies, I guess the only other thing is the shoebox. And whatever we might want to say to each other. What's the catch, Ryan? What do you want to return? Is there anything left in it? She remained suspicious of me. No catch, Lee. It's all there, except for a few thousand. I put some of my money into it and gave it to Sophie for a down payment on her home when she got married. If you want, she'll gladly start paying that money back over time. I noticed the surprise on Lee's face. She didn't know Sophie was married. Sophie's been married for 2 years now, and you're a grandmother. I could see the strain in her eyes as she fought back tears. The little girl's name is Shannon Learley Johnson. Shannon is named after her other grandmother. Lee's eyes were welling up now, despite her best efforts to hold back. Lee, I know you haven't been in contact with Sophie for a while. There's a way for you two to reconnect again. If you'd like, I can help pave the way. Learley nodded, and tears started rolling down her cheeks. I reached for a box of tissues on the side table and placed it on the coffee table. So let me give you a brief update on what's happened with me, unless you plan to leave right away. She wiped her cheek and tried to compose herself. Sophie found a great guy called Johnson. He's into computers and networks, and they seem to work really well together. She's a fantastic mom, and they're very devoted to each other. As for Rachel and me, we didn't last but a few months. She was too young for me and just needed me temporarily until she could get on with her life. She found another soldier and moved away. I've been dating here and there, but when it looks like a relationship might develop, I pull back. I'm better off alone. I'm going to say some things now that are really just for my benefit, but you might find something valuable in them too. I couldn't wait to see you in jail. I hated you and imagined your death countless times. But when they locked you up, my feelings began to shift. I found that I couldn't enjoy what I thought was a victory. So I stopped hating you, even though you didn't ask me to. I forgave you. The reason is simple. I realized you weren't solely to blame. I failed to understand you until it was too late, and we never really communicated. We only fought. Learley had regained her composure and looked up from the floor, her tough demeanor returning. That's really about it. Short and sweet. Unless you have something to say to me. If you don't want any refreshments, I won't keep you any longer. You probably have important things to do. She stood and picked up the shoebox as she headed toward the front door. For the first time since I pushed her away years ago, I called out to her, "It doesn't really matter now, and you don't have to answer unless you want to. But I've been wondering, all those years we spent together, especially that last day you were here, it was clear you saw me as weak. Do you still think I'm weak, Lee?" She paused, one hand on the doorknob, and looked back at me. "I hate you. You're cruel. You ruined my life." She hesitated. "But I don't think you're weak." And then she was gone,